the tractate of Bava Metzia is essentially about interpersonal relationships, interpersonal contracts. And we've been talking about renting out a house. Now, in the 9th chapter, we're just going to deal with renting in a field. And we need to keep in mind, by the way, that there is usually going to be some kind of shared ownership or shared profit from this field. Maybe the landlord will get a share of the crop. Maybe he'll get a fixed portion of the crop. At any rate, the landlord has got some, let's say, some stake in this field. And we'll see how that plays out in the halakha. And by the way, as we've always said, one of the determinative features of the practice of the Mishnah is going to be the local custom. And we'll see that play out here too. But let's just jump into the Mishnah. Someone received or someone leased a field from his fellow. So he's renting in the land. He wants to work the land. Makom shenagulik tsori ktsor lakor yakor. If the custom was to cut, he cuts. If the custom was to uproot, he uproots. What are we talking about here? Well, there are two ways of harvesting. And today, by the way, we cut, right? The combine harvester cuts. It cuts the wheat, and it leaves the bottom stalk. It leaves the bottom of the stalk planted in the ground, and then it takes the top off for threshing. But we don't have to do it that way. I mean, that is a better way to do it because it leaves the stalks in the field, and they'll rot, and they'll provide fertilizer eventually for the field. But we could actually uproot the plants of wheat and take the whole plant onto the threshing floor. And this seems to be what the Mishnah is talking about when it says, Makom shenahagu la'akor yakor. If the custom is to uproot, then he uproots. So whatever the traditional farming technique was in that place, we follow that technique. And then going on, lacharosh acharav yacharosh. If the custom was to plow after reaping, well, why would we want to plow after reaping? Well, we're going to plow in all the weeds. Even if we've already weeded the field, we're going to plow in all the weeds in order to get a good crop the following year. And we might only have rented this field for 1 year, but we are going to plow it so that it will be good the following year for the landlord or for the next tenant. And the Mishnah, this part of the Mishnah concludes, Hakol kaminhag ha-medina. Everything follows local custom. Just as they share the produce, just as they share the grain, so they share the straw and the stubble. So this seems to be like it's a profit share, or maybe it's a fixed quantity of the produce, but the produce includes the straw and the stubble. We're going to feed that to the animals. It's not just the grain. And let's think about a vineyard for a sec. Just as they share the wine, so they share the branches and the rods. We could have branches which we're chopping off the vine as we prune it, and that will be useful for wood. And uvak kanim, those are the rods. And if you go and even today, right, go into France and look at wine, look at vine husbandry, there are rods which are holding the vine up and which are holding the branches out. The rods are a crucial part of vine husbandry because they hold the vine in the right place. And we'll take those off at the end of we could take those off at the end of the harvest, but certainly we need to put them in at the beginning of the season. And the Mishnah goes on to say, Ushnehem misapkim et akanim. Both parties provide the rods. So when we say, Kach They share the branches and the rods, and both parties must provide the rods. Seems as though both parties, both the landlord and the tenant, are responsible for providing the wooden infrastructure to hold up the vines. What if something happens to the field, just as we discussed at the end of the last chapter? If someone rents a house and it falls down, well, the landlord has to replace it with another house. But let's have a look here. Someone leased a field from his fellow, and it was irrigated, or it had trees on it. This is a valuable piece of land, right? Because we can eat the fruit from the trees, and if it's irrigated with a spring, we can grow stuff on it. Yavash hamayan nitzatz ha'ilan. The spring dried up and the trees were cut down. What are we going to do? He's not allowed to reduce his rental. He's not allowed to reduce his rental. But there's always a but in the Mishnah. Im amar lo. If the tenant said to the landlord, Haskerli sadevet shlachin ze. If he said, rent me this irrigated field, or sadevet ilan ze, or this field with trees. In other words, if the irrigation and the trees were part of the contract, verbal contract, but a verbal contract is a contract in Torah, at least for this type of transaction. Yavash hamayan niktsas hailan menakelo mechachoro. If the spring dried up or the trees were cut down, he's going to give less than his rental. In other words, he can correct his rental because in the final analysis, the contract takes priority.